oil-stained hands, designer heels on concrete. "You'll never be someone," Sarah hissed, throwing the ring into the grease. The BMW roared away. 6 months later, $45 million. Too late. She was already gone, forever. The smell of burnt oil mixed with the suffocating heat of that Friday afternoon was already part of Michael's routine. He was underneath an old Chevy, arms dirty up to the elbows, when he heard the unmistakable purr of a powerful engine entering the shop. His heart froze before he even saw the car, a black BMW, gleaming, completely out of place in that humble corner of the north side. Michael slid out from under the vehicle with that automatic movement of someone who does this 1,000 times a day, wiped his hands on the rag that no longer cleaned anything, and felt his stomach twist when he saw Sarah stepping out of the passenger seat. She looked different. Her hair was impeccably styled, perfect waves falling over her shoulders. The beige-fitted dress marked every curve of the body he knew by heart. The high heels made noise on the cracked concrete of the shop like hammers pounding nails into a coffin. Michael. She pronounced his name like it was a death sentence. The other mechanics stopped what they were doing. Joe pretended to fiddle with a wrench, but his eyes darted toward the scene. Tommy quietly moved away, disappearing behind a pickup truck. Even Marcus, the youngest, sensed something terrible was about to happen and vanished into the back room. Sarah. Michael tried to smile. Tried to act like he didn't know what was coming. "What a surprise. Thought you had lunch with your friends today." "I did." She crossed her arms, looking around the shop with an expression that mixed disgust and pity. Her eyes lingered on the oil stains, the rusted tools, the peeling paint on the walls. "And you know something? Every single one of them asked me the same question. Sarah, when are you going to stop wasting time with that mechanic?" The words cut through the air like a sharp blade. Michael felt the blood drain from his face. He could feel everyone's eyes on him, witnessing his humiliation in real time. The radio playing classic rock in the corner seemed to mock the moment with its cheerful guitar riffs. "Sarah, please, let's talk somewhere else." He took a step toward her, reaching out, but she backed away as if his touch would contaminate her expensive dress. "No, enough talking!" She practically screamed, and her voice echoed off the metal walls of the shop. "Enough empty promises. Enough it'll get better. It'll change. I just need more time. I'm done waiting." Michael felt his legs weaken. His mouth went dry. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I'm tired." Sarah opened her designer purse, a bag he didn't recognize, that she clearly hadn't bought with her own money, and pulled out a small velvet box. The box that held the engagement ring he'd bought in 12 painful installments. "I'm tired of waiting for you to become someone, Michael. Someone who matters." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the sounds from the street seemed to have stopped. Time froze. "Become someone," Michael repeated, his voice coming out like a strangled whisper. "Are you saying I'm less than that? You work in a hole that reeks of oil." She gestured around with absolute contempt, her perfectly manicured nails pointing at the modest shop he'd worked so hard to help build. "You come home every single day covered in filth, with black fingernails, stinking of grease. I'm ashamed to introduce you to my friends. Do you understand that? Ashamed?" Each word was a knife to his chest. Michael felt his face burning with humiliation, felt his eyes begin to sting with unshed tears, but he refused to cry in front of her, in front of everyone watching this public execution. "Sarah, I work honestly. I've always treated you well. Always respected you. Respect doesn't pay the electric bill, Michael." She took a step forward, her finger pointing at him like a prosecutor delivering an accusation. "Respect doesn't buy nice clothes. Respect doesn't take me to restaurants where my friends go with their husbands. Respect doesn't give me the life I deserve." "Your friends?" he began, but the words caught in his throat. "Yes, my friends. People who've actually made something of themselves. Lawyers, businessmen, doctors. And what am I doing? I'm stuck here with a half-rate mechanic who doesn't even have the ambition to try to be something better." Michael closed his eyes for just a second, trying to compose himself. When he opened them, he saw Sarah pulling the engagement ring off her finger. That simple, modest ring that had cost him 3 months of salary. The ring he'd chosen so carefully, imagining her face when he proposed. 7 years, Sarah. We've been together 7 years. 7 years I wasted waiting for you to grow up. She looked at the ring with pure disgust, turning it between her fingers like it was contaminated. You know what Richard gave me yesterday? A real ring, with a real diamond, not this cheap piece of trash. The name hit him like a physical blow. Richard, the successful businessman she'd met at some charity event 3 months ago. The man Michael had tried not to see as a threat because he trusted her, because he loved her with everything he had. You're with him. It wasn't a question. He already knew the answer. I am. She said it without any shame, without any hint of regret. Her chin lifted defiantly. And you know why? Because he is somebody in life. He has a company, has real money, has an actual future. He takes me to places where real people go. He doesn't make me ride the bus reeking of poverty. I was never ashamed of you, Michael murmured, more to himself than to her, his voice barely audible over the ringing in his ears. Well, I am. I'm ashamed of you. Sarah practically spat the words at him. I'm ashamed to tell people my fiancé is a mechanic. I'm ashamed when my mother asks me when you're going to move up in life. I'm ashamed of this place, of your friends, of everything about this life. She threw the ring on the oil-stained floor with force. The small velvet box landed in a dark puddle of grease with a sickening splash, and the ring rolled across the concrete until it stopped near a rusted wrench. 7 years in the trash, just like that ring. Sarah turned on her heel, those expensive heels making that cruel clicking noise on the concrete as she walked toward the waiting BMW. So that's it? Michael finally found his voice, though it was broken into 1,000 pieces. You're just trading me in for money? That's all I was worth to you? She stopped at the door, hand on the BMW's handle. She turned back with a cold smile he'd never seen on her face before. A smile that belonged to a stranger. It's not trading, Michael. It's called moving up in life. You should try it sometime, if you ever figure out how. The BMW's engine roared to life, and the car peeled out of the parking lot, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake. Michael stood there in the middle of his shop, surrounded by the embarrassed, sympathetic looks of his co-workers, with the engagement ring thrown in the dirt like disposable garbage. The radio kept playing. The fan kept turning. Life kept moving. But Michael felt like something inside him had died. It was Joe who finally broke the suffocating silence, placing his heavy, oil-stained hand on Michael's shoulder. Boss, that woman didn't deserve you, not one bit. Michael didn't respond. He couldn't, because deep down, in a place he didn't want to acknowledge, part of him still loved that woman who had just destroyed him in front of everyone he knew. And that was the part that hurt the most. 6 years earlier, Sarah's car air conditioning had died on a Sunday of unbearable summer heat. She was stopped on the highway shoulder, sweating, frustrated, fanning herself uselessly, when Michael passed by on his motorcycle coming back from his brother's barbecue. He stopped without thinking twice. That was just who he was. Need help? Sarah looked at this man in a helmet, wearing a simple t-shirt and faded jeans. Normally she wouldn't have given him a second glance. But she was desperate, practically melting in that car, and he had such a genuinely kind smile. My air conditioning just died. Let me take a look. Michael opened the hood with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000,000 times. He worked here, adjusted there, and within 15 minutes, the cool air was flowing again through her vents. There you go. But you need to take this to a proper mechanic this week. This thing's about to blow completely. How much do I owe you? Nothing at all. He smiled, wiping his hands on a rag from his motorcycle bag. Just promise me you'll get it fixed properly, okay? Don't want you stranded somewhere dangerous. Sarah sat there watching this stranger walk back to his bike, and something unexpected stirred in her chest. It wasn't just gratitude. It was the genuinely gentle way he spoke, the honest look in his eyes, the simplicity without any hint of ulterior motives. The following week, she went back to the shop he'd recommended. That's when she discovered he actually worked there. You didn't tell me you were a mechanic. You didn't ask. Michael smiled in that way that could melt any resistance. But now that you know, do you still want me to fix your car? Or should I get one of the other guys? The first months together were pure magic. Michael was completely different from every man she'd ever dated. He opened doors for her without being asked, pulled out chairs, treated her like absolute royalty even though he earned so little. He took her to simple parks for picnics, created cheap but thoughtful surprises, wrote her little notes that made her heart flutter. "I don't have much money," he'd told her honestly on their third date, looking nervous but sincere. "But I have so much love to give, if that's enough for you." And back then, Sarah had believed with her whole heart that love was enough, that love could overcome anything. But then her friends started asking pointed questions. Her family started making comments. And gradually, slowly, that simple and pure love began to feel like a heavy weight on her chest. Sarah's friends were marrying successful men, lawyers, doctors, businessmen. They went to expensive restaurants, traveled to Europe, posted pictures from five-star hotels. Their lives looked like magazine spreads, and Sarah felt ashamed posting a photo from the pizza buffet. The pressure grew and grew, like weeds taking over a garden. They fought about money constantly, about their future, about ambition and dreams, and why he seemed content with so little. Until Richard appeared at that charity event. Rich, polished, confident, offering Sarah exactly what she'd convinced herself she deserved, a life of luxury and status. Back to the present. Michael bent down slowly, his knees aching, and picked up the ring from the puddle of grease. He cleaned it carefully with the edge of his shirt, each gentle movement somehow hurting more than the harsh words Sarah had thrown at him. Helen, his mother, appeared at the shop entrance at that exact moment. She'd come to bring him lunch, like she did every Friday without fail. But when she saw the scene, her son's absolutely destroyed expression, his co-workers' embarrassed faces, that dirty ring in his trembling hands, she understood everything instantly. "My boy." She rushed to him, her eyes already filling with tears. "Mom!" Michael's voice finally broke completely. "She left me, right here in front of everyone. She called me. She said I was less than human." Helen wrapped her arms around her son, holding him tight, and Michael broke down crying for the first time since he was a small child. He cried from the crushing humiliation, from the brutal rejection, from being thrown away like worthless trash simply because his bank account wasn't big enough. "That woman never deserved you, my son." Helen cupped his face with her calloused hands, hands rough from washing other people's clothes her entire life, to raise her children alone after his father left. "She never saw the truly wonderful man you are. She only saw what you had in your pocket. That's not love, that never was." "Maybe I'm really not enough, Mom. Maybe she's right. I'm just a mechanic." "You are a man." Helen spoke with fierce intensity, her voice strong despite her tears. "An honest, hard-working man of real character. That's worth more than any amount of money in this world. And one day, that shallow woman will realize exactly what she threw away. But by then, it'll be far too late." Michael didn't know in that devastating moment that his mother was absolutely right. He didn't know that in exactly 6 months, his entire world would change. He didn't know that Uncle Sebastian, that distant, eccentric relative he barely knew, had passed away and left an enormous inheritance of $45 million to his only nephew, who still cared enough to call every Christmas just to say hello. He didn't know that Sarah had just thrown away the biggest fortune she would ever have the chance to hold. But destiny knew. And destiny has its own particular way of teaching harsh lessons to people who measure human worth by the size of their bank accounts. 3 weeks had passed since Dr. Hartley walked into the shop and changed everything. 3 weeks since Michael signed those papers with trembling hands. 3 weeks since $45 million appeared in his bank account, like stars materializing in an empty sky. He sat in his small living room, staring at the laptop screen. The numbers glowed back at him, impossibly large, impossibly real. He refreshed the page. The numbers stayed. This wasn't a dream. Michael closed the laptop and rubbed his eyes. He hadn't slept properly in weeks. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sarah's face, heard her cruel words echoing endlessly. "You'll never be enough. Just a half-rate mechanic. You're less than human." The irony twisted in his gut like a knife. 6 months. If she had waited just 6 more months, she would have had everything she claimed to want. The money, the status, the luxury lifestyle she'd thrown him away to chase with Richard. But she hadn't waited, and that revealed something he'd been too blind to see when he loved her. Helen knocked softly before entering, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She'd been staying with him since the news, worried about her son rattling around this empty apartment alone with his thoughts and his sudden fortune. "Couldn't sleep again?" She handed him a cup and settled into the worn armchair across from him. "Too much in my head, Mom." "I imagine so." Helen sipped her coffee, studying her son's face. $45 million is a lot to process. But that's not what's really keeping you awake, is it? Michael looked at his mother. She'd always been able to read him like an open book. "I keep thinking about her, about Sarah, about how if she'd just—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "It's stupid. She made her choice. She showed me exactly who she was. You're wondering if you should tell her." Helen's voice was gentle but knowing. "No." Michael said it quickly. Too quickly. "I mean, I don't know. Part of me wants her to know what she threw away. Wants to see her face when she realizes. That's natural. That's human." Helen set down her cup. "But what would it accomplish? Would it change anything? Would it heal what she broke?" Michael sat in silence, letting the question settle over him. Outside, he could hear the city waking up. Cars starting, dogs barking. Life continuing its relentless forward march whether he was ready or not. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about not telling anyone. About the money, I mean. Just you know. But everyone else. I want to keep working at the shop, keep living normal. Like nothing changed." Helen's eyebrows rose slightly. "Why, son?" "Because I need to know." The words came out raw, honest. "When someone loves me again, if someone loves me again, I need to know it's for who I am, not for what I have in the bank. Sarah destroyed me because I wasn't rich enough. I can't go through that again. Can't wonder if someone's with me or for the money." Helen reached across and took his hand, her calloused fingers squeezing his. "You're wiser than most men twice your age. That woman taught you a painful lesson, but you're taking wisdom from it instead of bitterness. That's strength." "Is it?" Michael's voice cracked slightly. "Or is it cowardice? Hiding who I really am now? You're not hiding who you are. You're protecting yourself while you heal, and you're making sure the next person who comes into your life loves the real you, the man you've always been. That's not cowardice, that's survival." Helen paused, then added softly, "And it's insurance against becoming what hurt you." Michael nodded slowly, feeling something loosen in his chest. His mother had a way of cutting through confusion straight to truth. "There's something else," Helen continued. "Money changes people. Or rather, it reveals who they always were. You have a choice now. You can let this fortune turn you into someone who judges others the way Sarah judged you. Someone who measures worth in dollar signs. Or you can let it be a tool for good while staying the man I raised." "I want to help people," Michael said, quietly, without making a big show. "Joe needs knee surgery he's been putting off. Tommy's drowning in debt. Marcus wants to go to technical school but can't afford it. I can fix all of that without them ever knowing it came from me." Helen smiled, and tears glinted in her eyes. "Your uncle chose wisely. You're exactly the kind of man who should have this money. I just wish—" Michael stopped, swallowed hard. "I wish I could stop thinking about her. About Sarah. She doesn't deserve space in my head anymore. Healing takes time, son. You loved her, really loved her. That doesn't just disappear because she showed her true colors, but it will fade. And one day, you'll meet someone who makes you grateful Sarah left. Someone who sees your worth without needing a bank statement to prove it." Michael wanted to believe her. But sitting there in his small apartment, the wound still raw, it was hard to imagine loving anyone ever again. 2 months later, Michael was at the bank on a Thursday afternoon, handling some investment paperwork. The financial advisor kept calling him Mr. Patterson, with that particular tone of voice reserved for wealthy clients. It made his skin crawl. He was waiting in line at the coffee shop inside the bank when he noticed the woman struggling with a massive stack of papers. They slipped from her arms, scattering across the floor in a cascade of white sheets covered in numbers and equations. "Oh no, no, no!" She dropped to her knees, trying to gather everything, her face flushing red with embarrassment. Michael knelt automatically to help. He started collecting pages, noticing they were math tests, covered in student answers and red correction marks. "Thank you so much," she said breathlessly, not looking up as she grabbed papers frantically. "I'm such a disaster. I told myself I needed a better bag, but did I listen? No, of course not." Michael found himself smiling despite everything. There was something genuine about her flustered rambling. He handed her a stack of collected tests. "Here you go. Looks like 7th grade math." She finally looked up at him, and Michael felt something shift in his chest. She was pretty in an understated way. Warm brown eyes behind simple glasses, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. No makeup he could detect. A tired but kind face. 7th grade algebra, she confirmed, accepting the papers with a grateful smile. "And they're quite creative with their wrong answers, let me tell you. Yesterday I saw someone solve for X by writing X marks the spot with a little treasure map." Michael laughed, genuinely laughed for the first time in months. "That's actually pretty clever, right?" She stood, and he rose with her, handing over the last few papers. I almost gave him partial credit for creativity. "I'm Julia, by the way. Disaster-prone math teacher. Michael, currently playing helpful stranger." She adjusted her glasses, studying him for a moment. There was no calculation in her gaze, no assessment of his worth, just open, friendly curiosity. "Well, helpful stranger Michael, I owe you a coffee, or at least a place in line ahead of me, since I just held everyone up." "You don't owe me anything," Michael said automatically. Then, surprising himself, he added, "But I wouldn't mind buying you that coffee anyway, if you have time." Julia glanced at her watch, then at the stack of ungraded tests in her arms, then back at Michael. Something in his expression must have convinced her. "You know what? These tests can wait another hour. The kids already think I'm slow at grading. What's one more day?" They got their coffee and found a small table near the window. The afternoon sun streamed through, making the moment feel somehow separate from real life. A pocket of peace Michael hadn't experienced in so long. "So what do you do, Michael?" Julia asked, wrapping her hands around her cup. "Besides rescuing scattered paperwork?" "I'm a mechanic. Own a shop on the north side." He watched carefully for her reaction, waited for the subtle disappointment, the slight pulling back, the judgment. It never came. "Oh, that's wonderful." Her smile was genuinely warm. "My dad was in construction, built our house with his own hands. I've always respected people who work with their hands, who can actually fix things. I can barely change a light bulb without help." Something in Michael's chest, something that had been clenched tight since Sarah's betrayal, began to cautiously unfurl. "It's honest work," he said carefully. "Doesn't pay great, but I like it. Satisfaction in taking something broken and making it work again." "That's exactly how I feel about teaching," Julia said, leaning forward with enthusiasm. "Everyone focuses on the pay, which is terrible, don't get me wrong. But when you see that moment when a kid finally gets it, when the light bulb goes on and they understand something they thought was impossible, that's worth everything." They talked for 2 hours. The coffee went cold. The bank closed around them. Julia told him about her students, about the challenges of teaching math to kids who thought they hated it. Michael found himself telling her about the shop, about his co-workers, about the satisfaction of solving mechanical puzzles. He didn't mention the $45 million sitting in his bank account, didn't mention Uncle Sebastian or the inheritance or any of it. And for the first time since that lawyer walked into his life, Michael felt like himself again. Not rich, not poor, just himself. When they finally left the bank, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I had a really nice time," Julia said, clutching her stack of tests. "This was exactly what I needed today. Thank you, Michael. Can I see you again?" The words came out before he could overthink them. "Maybe dinner this weekend?" Julia smiled, and it reached all the way to her eyes. "I'd really like that." They exchanged numbers. As Michael watched her walk to her car, an old Honda that had seen better days, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not because she was pretty, not because she'd said yes, but because when she looked at him, she saw him. Not his bank account, not his potential, not what he could give her or buy her, just him. That night, Michael sat with Helen at the kitchen table, a pizza box between them. Cheap pizza from the corner place they'd been going to for years. It tasted better than any expensive meal he could afford now. "You're smiling," Helen observed. "First time in months." "What happened?" "I met someone." Michael felt almost shy saying it out loud. "A teacher. Her name's Julia. We just had coffee, but Mom, she didn't care that I'm a mechanic. Didn't look disappointed. Didn't seem to calculate my worth. She just Talk to me like a person. Helen reached across and squeezed his hand. That's how it should be, son. That's how it should always be. It's too soon, right? Michael asked, suddenly uncertain. Sarah just left a few months ago. I shouldn't be thinking about someone else already. Sarah left you 6 months before that. Emotionally, Helen said gently. She just finally made it official. You're allowed to heal. You're allowed to open your heart again, especially to someone who might actually deserve it. Michael nodded slowly. The wound Sarah left was still there, still tender. But maybe, just maybe, Julia was the beginning of healing. Not a replacement, not a bandage. Just a sign that life could move forward, that not everyone measured love in dollar signs. I'm scared, he admitted quietly. Scared to trust again. Scared she'll turn out to be just like Sarah once she finds out about the money. Then don't tell her yet, Helen said simply. Take your time. Get to know her. Let her get to know you, the real you. When you're ready, when you trust her completely, then you'll know if she can handle that truth. And if she can't, then she wasn't the right one either. But son, you can't let Sarah's cruelty make you cynical forever. Not everyone is like her. Some people really do value character over currency. Michael looked at his mother, this strong woman who'd raised him on almost nothing, who'd never let poverty define their worth, and nodded. I really hope so, Mom, because I really like this woman, and I want to believe that somewhere out there, someone can love me for who I am, not what I have. They can, Helen assured him, and I think maybe you just met her. Outside, the city hummed with evening life. Inside, Michael felt something precious and fragile stirring back to life in his chest. The courage to try again. 6 months had passed since that afternoon at the bank. 6 months of coffee dates and simple dinners. 6 months of Julia making Michael laugh again, making him feel human again. 6 months of carefully guarding his secret. They sat on a bench in Riverside Park eating hot dogs from a street vendor. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of perfect autumn day where the sun felt warm, but the breeze carried a hint of approaching winter. Children played on the swings nearby. An elderly couple walked past holding hands. Julia had mustard on her chin. Michael reached over with a napkin and wiped it away, and she laughed that genuine, unself-conscious laugh that made his heart feel lighter every time he heard it. I'm such a mess when I eat, she said, not embarrassed at all, just honest. My students would be horrified. Miss Julia, the dignified math teacher, eating like a 5-year-old. I think it's perfect, Michael said, and he meant it. Everything about her felt real. No pretense, no performance. Just Julia. She leaned her head on his shoulder, comfortable and easy. This is nice. This is exactly what I needed today. Just this. Michael felt his chest tighten. Not with pain this time, but with something else. Something that felt dangerously close to love. Maybe already was love. And that terrified him, because he was lying to her. Every day. By omission, but still lying. She thought he was just a mechanic scraping by. Thought his small apartment was all he could afford. Thought their cheap dates were budget limitations rather than careful choices. She'd never once complained. Never hinted she wanted more. Never looked at other couples in expensive restaurants with envy. But Sarah hadn't complained at first either. Sarah had seemed content until she wasn't. You're quiet, Julia observed, lifting her head to look at him. Everything okay? Just thinking. About? Michael hesitated. The secret felt like a wall between them, growing taller every day. About how lucky I am to have found you. Julia smiled softly. I'm the lucky one. You're the first genuinely good man I've met in years. Do you know how rare that is? Someone who opens doors not to impress, but because it's who you are. Someone who actually listens when I talk about my students. Someone who doesn't check his phone every 5 minutes. Each word was a small knife of guilt. She saw him as genuine, as honest, but he was hiding something massive from her. Julia, what if... He stopped, unsure how to phrase it. What if you found out I wasn't who you thought I was? She tilted her head, studying him with those intelligent eyes behind her simple glasses. What do you mean? Just hypothetically. What if there was something about me you didn't know? Something big? Julia was quiet for a moment, watching the children play. Are you married? What? No. Secret kids somewhere? No, nothing like that. Criminal record? Secret identity as a superhero? Actually a woman? She was teasing now, trying to lighten his suddenly serious mood. Michael couldn't help but smile. No to all of the above. Then whatever it is, Julia said, taking his hand, I'm sure we can handle it. As long as you're not secretly married or a serial killer, we're probably okay. But would they be? Would she still look at him the same way if she knew about the $45 million? Or would something change in her eyes? Some subtle shift from seeing him as an equal to seeing him as a prize? A ticket to easier life? He hated that Sarah had planted these doubts in him. Hated that he couldn't trust his own judgment anymore. I care about you, Julia said quietly. Seriously now. A lot. More than I've cared about anyone in a long time. Whatever you're worried about, we can talk about it when you're ready, okay? Michael nodded, not trusting his voice. They finished their hot dogs in comfortable silence, and he tried to push the guilt away. Tried to just enjoy this moment. This simple, perfect moment. 2 weeks later, Julia called him on a Tuesday evening, and Michael knew immediately something was wrong. Her voice sounded strained, tired in a way that went beyond end-of-day exhaustion. Hey, are you okay? He asked, already reaching for his keys. I'm fine. It's been a really long day. Can we talk? 20 minutes later, he was at her apartment, a small one-bedroom in an older building. The kind of place that was clean and well-kept, but showed its age in the creaking floors and the radiator that clanked at odd hours. Julia opened the door, looking exhausted. Still in her teaching clothes, hair escaping from its ponytail, eyes red-rimmed. What happened? Michael stepped inside, immediately concerned. My mom. Julia sank onto her worn sofa, pulling her knees up. She needs surgery, hip replacement, and her insurance barely covers anything. I've been trying to figure out how to help her, but teachers don't exactly make... She gestured vaguely, helplessly. I don't have that kind of money, and I can't let her suffer because I can't afford to help. Michael's heart broke watching her. And simultaneously, a voice in his head whispered, You could fix this. Right now. You could write a check and solve everything. But that would mean revealing the truth. And he wasn't ready. Wasn't sure if he'd ever be ready. How much does she need? He asked carefully. $15,000 after insurance. Might as well be $15 million for all I can scrape together. Julia laughed bitterly. I've been looking into loans, but with my salary and student debt, I'm sorry. I shouldn't dump this on you. We've only been dating a few months. This isn't your problem. Hey, Michael sat beside her, pulled her close. Don't apologize. That's what people do. They help each other. Julia leaned into him, and he felt her shoulders shake with silent tears. I just feel so helpless. She raised me alone after Dad died. Worked so hard to give me everything. And now she needs help and I can't. Michael held her, his mind racing. He could help. Could solve this so easily. $15,000 was nothing compared to what he had. He spent more than that monthly on investments he didn't need. But if he helped, he'd have to explain. And if he explained, everything would change. Unless... Let me look into some things, he said carefully. I know some people. Maybe there are payment plans or assistance programs or... Let me make some calls, okay? Julia pulled back, wiping her eyes. You don't have to do that. I want to. Let me help. She looked at him with such gratitude, such trust, that the guilt nearly choked him. But he pushed it down. He would help her mother, anonymously, through some foundation or charity. He'd figure it out. Thank you, Julia whispered. Just having you here helps. You know that? Just knowing I'm not alone in this. Michael kissed her forehead, holding her close, and made a silent promise to himself. He would help, without revealing the truth, without changing what they had, even if it meant the lie continued to grow. 3 days later, Michael sat in Dr. Hartley's office. The lawyer looked confused when Michael explained what he needed. You want to set up an anonymous medical assistance program? For one specific person? For multiple people eventually, Michael clarified. But starting with Julia's mother, it needs to look legitimate, like she applied and qualified through normal channels. Can you do that? Dr. Hartley studied him thoughtfully. Mr. Patterson, may I speak freely? Please. You're going to considerable effort to hide your wealth from this woman. Why not simply tell her? If she cares about you, really cares, the money shouldn't matter. That's exactly the problem, Michael said. It shouldn't matter, but it does. It always does. I need to know she loves me, really loves me, before money enters the equation. And if she finds out you've been hiding this, that breach of trust could destroy what you're trying to protect. Michael had thought about this, obsessed over it during sleepless nights. I know, but right now, I need to know what we have is real. That she chose me when I was just a mechanic. Once I'm certain, completely certain, then I'll tell her everything. But not yet. Dr. Hartley sighed, but nodded. I'll set it up. A medical assistance grant through a legitimate charitable foundation. Her mother will receive notice that her application was approved. It'll look completely normal. Thank you. Just be careful, Mr. Patterson. Secrets have a way of coming out, and when they do, they often hurt more than the original truth would have. Michael knew he was right, but he couldn't take that risk. Not yet. Not when Sarah's words still echoed in his mind during weak moments. Not when he still sometimes woke up from nightmares where Julia looked at him with dollar signs in her eyes. 1 week later, Julia practically tackled him when he came to pick her up for dinner. She was crying, but this time they were tears of joy. Michael, you won't believe it. Mom got accepted for this medical assistance program. They're covering the entire surgery, everything. I don't know how. I filled out so many applications I lost track, but one of them came through. Michael held her as she cried happy tears into his shirt, felt her relief and joy, and felt his own guilt growing heavier. That's amazing, he managed. I'm so happy for her. For you. I have to take it all back, Julia said, pulling away to look at him, her face glowing. Every cynical thing I've ever said about the universe or fate or whatever. This is a miracle. An actual miracle. Your mom deserves it. After everything she's done for you. Julia grabbed his face and kissed him hard, desperate and grateful and full of emotion. When she pulled back, she was smiling through tears. I love you, she said. Just said it, simply and honestly. I know it's only been a few months, but I love you. You've been my rock through all of this. Even when you couldn't fix it, just having you here made everything bearable. Michael's heart stopped, then started again, beating so hard he thought she must hear it. She loved him, actually loved him, said it without hesitation, without calculation, without knowing about the money. This was the moment he'd been waiting for, the proof he needed. She loved him when she thought he was poor, when he couldn't solve her problems, when all he could offer was presence and support. I love you too, he said, and meant it with everything in him. So much, Julia. They held each other in her doorway, the city humming around them, the sunset painting the sky in brilliant colors, and Michael felt something he hadn't felt in over a year, complete and total certainty that he'd found something real, something true, something Sarah had never given him and never could have. Real love, the kind that existed without price tags. Now he just had to figure out when and how to tell her the truth, before she found out some other way, before the secret he'd kept to protect them became the thing that destroyed them. But for now, in this moment, he just held her, and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would work out, that when he finally revealed the truth, she would understand why he'd hidden it, would see it as protection rather than deception, would love him anyway. He had to believe that, because the alternative was losing another person he loved, and this time, it would break him beyond repair. 1 year had passed since the inheritance changed Michael's life. 1 year of living in two worlds, the real one where he had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, and the one he'd created with Julia, where he was just a mechanic making ends meet. They'd moved in together 3 months ago, a modest apartment Michael had rented, though he owned the entire building. Julia insisted on splitting rent and utilities, contributing her teacher's salary to their shared life. Every month, Michael watched her carefully budget her portion, saw her choose generic brands to save money, and the guilt grew heavier. It was a Saturday morning. Julia was grading papers at the kitchen table, hair in a messy bun, wearing one of his old t-shirts. Morning sunlight streamed through the window. Coffee brewed in the cheap maker they'd bought together at a discount store. Everything felt perfect and domestic and built on a foundation of lies. Michael couldn't do it anymore, couldn't keep pretending, couldn't watch the woman he loved scrimp and save when he could give her the world. More importantly, couldn't build a future on deception. "Julia," he said, his voice coming out more serious than intended. "We need to talk." She looked up, immediately concerned. Those 4 words never meant anything good. "Okay, what's wrong?" Michael sat across from her, his hands shaking slightly. "Nothing's wrong, but there's something I need to tell you. Something big. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Julia set down her pen, giving him her full attention. He could see worry creeping into her eyes. "You're scaring me. Just say it. I'm not who you think I am." The words tumbled out. "I mean, I am. I'm still me. But there's something about my life you don't know. Michael, please, just tell me what's going on." He took a deep breath. "A year ago, my Uncle Sebastian died. I barely knew him. We talked once a year at Christmas. Apparently, he'd been testing all his relatives for years, seeing who cared about him as a person versus who just wanted his money." Julia's brow furrowed. "Okay. He left me everything. His entire estate, his company, everything." Michael forced himself to meet her eyes. $45 million, Julia, plus ongoing royalties from patents. The silence that followed felt like it lasted hours. Julia just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Outside, a car honked. The coffee maker beeped. Life continued while their world hung in balance. $45 million, she repeated slowly, like testing the words. "Dollars. Yes. And you've known this for how long?" "A year. Since right after Sarah left." Julia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She walked to the window, her back to him. Michael could see her shoulders rising and falling with careful breaths. "A year," she said to the window. "We've been together almost that entire time, and you never thought to mention this? Julia, please let me explain." "Explain what?" She turned, and he saw hurt replacing the shock in her eyes. "Explain why you've been lying to me for a year. Why you've watched me stress about bills, about my student loans, about whether I could afford to fix my car, and you said nothing. I wasn't lying. I didn't tell you everything. That's the same thing, Michael." Her voice rose, something rare for her. "You let me believe you were struggling just like me. Let me feel bad about suggesting restaurants you supposedly couldn't afford. Let me insist on splitting everything 50-50 when you're a multi-millionaire." Michael stood, desperate to make her understand. "I needed to know. After Sarah, after what she did to me, I needed to know that someone could love me for who I am, not what I have. So you tested me." Julia's voice broke. "Like your uncle tested you? You turned our entire relationship into some kind of experiment?" "No, it wasn't like that." "Then what was it like? Because from where I'm standing, you didn't trust me. You played house, playing poor, while sitting on a fortune. And the whole time I thought we were partners, equals. But we weren't, were we? Because you knew the truth and I didn't." Michael felt his own eyes burning. "I was scared. Sarah destroyed me. She called me worthless because I didn't have money. When I met you, you were so different, so real, and I fell in love with that. But I was terrified that if you knew about the money, you'd change, or that I'd never know if you loved me or the security I could provide. So you lied. I protected us by not trusting me." Julia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "My mom's surgery. You set that up, didn't you? That mysterious grant that came through?" Michael hesitated. "Yes, but I couldn't let her suffer when I could help." "Oh my God." Julia sat down hard, like her legs couldn't support her anymore. "You manipulated that entire situation. Let me cry on your shoulder about something you'd already fixed. Let me feel grateful to the universe when it was just you, pulling strings, playing God with my life. I was trying to help, without telling me, without giving me a choice." She looked at him like she was seeing a stranger. "Do you know how that makes me feel? Like I'm some kind of charity case you've been managing? Some experiment to see if the poor teacher really loves you? Julia, please. I love you. That was never fake. How I feel about you, that's the most real thing in my life. But you didn't trust me with the truth." She stood again, moving toward the bedroom. "I need time to think. I need you to leave." "Leave?" Panic seized him. "Julia, no, please. Let's talk about this. We've talked." Her voice was cold now, distant. "Or rather, you've talked. You've explained your reasons. And maybe they make sense to you. But Michael, you built our entire relationship on a lie. You watched me struggle and chose your fear over trusting me. I was going to tell you. I was just waiting for the right time. The right time was the first time we said we loved each other, or when we moved in together, or any of the 100 moments when we talked about our future." She wiped her eyes angrily. "But you chose to keep lying. And I can't. I need space. Don't do this. Please, don't let this destroy what we have." Julia looked at him, and the pain in her eyes broke his heart. "You already did that. When you decided your fear was more important than my right to know the truth." Michael wanted to argue more, wanted to make her understand, but he saw something in her face that stopped him. Saw that pushing now would only make things worse. "How long?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. I just know I can't look at you right now without wondering what else you've been hiding, without feeling like everything we've built is just theater." He gathered his keys, his wallet, moved toward the door like a man walking to his execution. At the threshold, he turned back. "For what it's worth, everything I felt was real. Everything we had was real. The money was never the point. That's the problem, Michael." Julia's voice was barely a whisper. "For you, the money wasn't the point. But for me, the lies are. And I don't know if I can get past that." The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet hallway. 3 days later, Michael hadn't slept, hadn't eaten properly. He went through the motions at the shop, but Joe and Tommy exchanged worried glances when they thought he wasn't looking. His phone sat on the counter, silent and accusatory. No calls, no texts. Julia had blocked him on everything. Helen came by the shop at lunchtime, took one look at him, and pulled him into the back office. "You told her." "How did you know?" "Because you look exactly like you did when Sarah left, except worse." Helen studied her son. "What happened?" Michael told her everything. The conversation, Julia's reaction, the devastation in her eyes when she realized he'd been hiding the truth for a year. "She's right to be angry," Helen said when he finished. "Mom, no, listen. I understand why you did it. I do. Sarah hurt you badly. But son, you let that hurt poison something good. You didn't trust Julia. And trust is the foundation of everything. I just wanted to be sure." "Sure of what? That she loved you?" "She showed you that every single day. You just couldn't see it because you were too busy looking for proof." Helen took his hands. "Sarah made you doubt yourself, made you think your worth was tied to money. But then you turned around and did the same thing. Let money define your relationship with Julia, just from the other direction." Michael felt the truth of her words like a weight on his chest. "I ruined it, didn't I?" "Maybe, maybe not." Helen squeezed his hands. "But if there's any chance to fix this, you need to give her space. Let her process. And when she's ready, if she's ready, you need to be honest. Completely honest. No more tests. No more protection. Just truth. What if she doesn't come back? Then you'll have learned an expensive lesson. Not expensive in money, expensive in heart. That some things are worth more than protecting yourself. Worth the risk." Michael nodded, throat too tight to speak. His mother pulled him into a hug, and he let himself be held like a child. Let himself cry for the second time in his life. First, for what Sarah took from him. Now, for what his own fear might have destroyed. 1 week later, Michael was closing up the shop when he saw her. Julia stood near his truck, hands in her jacket pockets, looking nervous and small. His heart stopped, then started racing. He walked toward her slowly, afraid any sudden movement might make her disappear. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." They stood in awkward silence. A year of easy conversation, reduced to single syllables. "I've been thinking," Julia finally said, "about everything, about us, about what you did and why you did it." Michael waited, afraid to hope. "I understand why you were scared. After what Sarah did to you, I get it. And part of me, a small part, can even understand the test, the wanting to be sure. But," Michael heard it coming, "but you didn't just test whether I loved you. You tested whether I'd stay when I found out you'd been lying. And that's not fair." She looked at him directly. "I do love you. I loved you when I thought you were a mechanic barely making rent. I love you now, knowing you're secretly wealthy. The money doesn't change how I feel, but the lying does. I know. I'm so sorry, Julia." "I know sorry isn't enough. I need you to promise me something." She stepped closer. No more lies, no more tests, no more protecting me from truths I deserve to know. If we're going to be together, really together, we have to be equals, partners. That means trusting me with everything, even the scary stuff. I promise. Michael said it without hesitation. Complete honesty. Always, I swear. Julia studied his face, and he let her look. Let her see everything he felt. The love, the remorse, the desperate hope that she'd give him another chance. I need time still, she said. This isn't fixed. We're not just back to normal. But I'm willing to try, if you're willing to do the actual work of trusting me. Anything, Michael said fervently. Whatever you need, whatever it takes. She nodded slowly. Okay, then let's start over. The right way this time. Hi, I'm Julia Martin. I'm a 7th grade math teacher who barely makes ends meet. And you are? Michael felt his throat tighten with emotion and hope. I'm Michael Patterson. I'm a mechanic who inherited more money than he knows what to do with. But more importantly, I'm a man who loves you, really loves you. And I'm going to spend every day proving that I trust you as much as you trusted me. Julia smiled. Small, tentative, but real. That's a good start. She reached for his hand, and when their fingers intertwined, Michael felt like he could breathe again. They weren't healed. The damage was still there. But this was a beginning. A real one this time. Built on truth instead of fear. And as they stood in the empty parking lot, holding hands in the fading light, Michael understood what his mother had tried to tell him. Love without trust was just playing house. But trust without fear, that was the real fortune, worth more than any inheritance. 3 years later, the small clothing boutique where Sarah worked was tucked in a strip mall on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just racks of moderately priced dresses and fluorescent lights that hummed constantly. She stood behind the register, feet aching in cheap shoes, watching the clock crawl toward closing time. Her manager had already left. Sarah was alone with her thoughts and the silence. Life after Richard had been brutal. The FBI investigation, the scandal, the divorce that left her with nothing. Everything she'd chased, the mansion, the luxury cars, the designer wardrobe, all seized or sold. Her friends vanished overnight. Fernanda blocked her number. Patricia pretended not to see her. Roberta crossed the street to avoid her. Fair-weather friends attracted by wealth, scattered by poverty. Sarah lived in a studio apartment now, took the bus, ate ramen, worked retail for minimum wage. The life she'd once looked down on had become her reality, and through it all, one thought haunted her. Michael. The bell above the door chimed. Sarah looked up, customer service smile automatic. It died on her lips. Michael stood in the doorway, but not the Michael she remembered. This Michael wore an expensive suit that fit perfectly, confident posture, success radiating from him. And beside him, holding his hand, was a woman, pretty in an understated way. Glasses, simple dress, genuine smile. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Sarah. Michael's voice was neutral, not warm, not cold, just acknowledgement. Michael. Her voice strangled. What are you doing here? Shopping for my wife. He squeezed the woman's hand. Julia, this is Sarah. Sarah, my wife. Julia, wife. The word hit like a physical blow. Julia extended her hand, genuinely friendly. Nice to meet you. Michael's mentioned you. Sarah shook numbly, mind racing. The expensive suit, the confident bearing. Something was very different. I'll look around, Julia said, kissing Michael's cheek. Take your time. She moved toward the dresses, leaving them alone. Awkward silence fell. You look well, Sarah managed. Thank you. You look... Michael paused, pity flickering in his eyes. Different. Things changed. Richard, there was an investigation. It all fell apart. I heard. I'm sorry that happened. The kindness in his tone made her want to cry. After everything she'd done, he could still manage compassion. That suit, she said. Business must be doing well. Michael was quiet. Then, I should tell you something. Remember my Uncle Sebastian? The one I used to call at Christmas? Sarah nodded, confused. He died about 6 months after you left. Left me everything. $45 million. Plus a company that generates ongoing income. The world tilted. Sarah grabbed the counter. 45 million? Plus investments. It's grown since then." He said it matter-of-factly. "Funny timing, wasn't it? 6 months after you called me worthless for being poor." Sarah couldn't breathe. The math crashed through her mind. If she'd stayed, if she'd waited just 6 more months, if she hadn't been so greedy, so cruel. "I didn't know," she whispered. "No, you didn't. But that's the point." Michael's voice was gentle but firm. "You left because I wasn't rich enough. Not because I treated you badly. Not because I didn't love you. Just because of money." "Michael, Julia knew me for a year before I told her about the money. A whole year. And you know what? She loved me anyway. Loved me when she thought I could barely pay rent. The money didn't change how she felt." Tears burned Sarah's eyes. "I made a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life." "Yes, you did. But not the one you think." He said it without cruelty. Just truth. "Your mistake wasn't leaving a poor man who turned out to be rich. Your mistake was measuring human worth by bank account balance. You threw away something real for something shiny." "That's harsh." "Is it? You humiliated me publicly. Called me less than human. Threw our engagement ring in the dirt like garbage. All because I didn't have enough money to satisfy your greed. And now you're upset because I'm pointing out that you destroyed the best thing you ever had?" Sarah felt tears spill over. "I was stupid. I was shallow. I know that now. You've learned that money doesn't buy happiness. That's good." Michael's expression softened slightly. "But Sarah, you didn't just hurt me. You revealed who you fundamentally were. Someone who valued appearance over substance. You didn't love me. You loved what you thought I could give you." Julia appeared then, holding a simple blue dress. "This one's perfect, honey." Michael's entire face transformed when he looked at her. Love so obvious it was almost painful to witness. "You're going to look beautiful." "You always say that," Julia laughed. "Because it's always true." They moved toward the register. Sarah rang up the purchase with shaking hands. $45. Michael pulled out a black credit card. Unlimited, the kind only millionaires carried. "Sarah," Julia said as Sarah processed payment. "Michael told me what happened. I don't hate you. What you did was cruel, but it taught him an important lesson. It made him value real love when he found it. The kindness was somehow worse than anger." Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Michael signed the receipt. "Take care of yourself, Sarah. I genuinely hope you find what you're looking for. But I hope even more that you figure out what you're looking for shouldn't be found in someone's wallet." They left together, his arm around Julia's waist, her head on his shoulder. Through the window, Sarah watched them walk to a luxury car, watched them laugh, watched them drive away into a life she'd thrown away. She sank onto the stool behind the register and cried, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Cried for the life she'd lost, for the man she'd destroyed, for the person she'd been, and the bitter lessons learned too late. 2 weeks later, Sarah had tried to reach out, called the shop, sent messages, each one ignored or blocked. Finally, she wrote a letter, poured her heart out, apologized for everything. The response came via certified mail, from Dr. Hartley, Michael's attorney. "Ms. Williams, Mr. Patterson has asked me to respond. He wishes you well but requests that you cease all contact. He has moved on and asks that you do the same. Any further attempts will be considered harassment." The formal rejection hurt more than she thought possible, not because she believed Michael would take her back, but because it was final, absolute. She'd destroyed something so completely that even forgiveness didn't include reconciliation. She kept the letter, a reminder of the cost of her choices. 6 months later, Sarah sat in a diner during her lunch break, eating a salad she'd brought from home. A newspaper lay on the table, open to the business section. Local entrepreneur expands youth training programs. There was a photo. Michael and Julia at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. He'd opened free automotive training centers in underserved neighborhoods, teaching kids the skills he'd learned. The article mentioned his wealth only briefly. He clearly didn't flaunt it. Julia stood beside him, teaching financial literacy classes, using her educator skills to help people. They looked genuinely happy, genuinely in love, living lives of meaning beyond money. Sarah folded the paper carefully and sat staring at nothing. She'd spent 7 years with a man who would grow up to be generous, successful, and kind. A man who would use wealth to help others. A man who would have treated her like a queen forever if she'd just seen past the oil stains. Instead, she'd traded him for a criminal. For a man who betrayed her, used her, left her with nothing. Mrs. Nguyen, an older woman who came to the diner daily, sat down across from her uninvited. She did this sometimes. "You look sad, honey. Just thinking about choices, about mistakes. We all make mistakes. Question is, what do we learn?" "I learned that chasing money cost me everything." "No." The old woman shook her head. "Money wasn't the problem. Greed was. Thinking you deserved more than what you had. Not appreciating a good man because he didn't come wrapped in dollar bills." Sarah felt tears again. "How do I fix it?" "You don't. Not with him. That bridge is burned." Mrs. Nguyen's voice was kind but honest. "But you can fix yourself. Stop measuring worth in money, yours or anyone else's. Start seeing people for who they are, not what they can give you." "And if I don't?" "Then you'll be rich or poor. But either way, you'll be alone." Mrs. Nguyen stood, patted her shoulder. "Better poor with love than wealthy with regret." Sarah watched her go, and the words settled deep. She thought about Michael and Julia, about their simple happiness, about love that existed before and despite money. She'd spent her life chasing the wrong things, valuing the wrong qualities. And she'd learned her lesson in the cruelest way possible, by losing everything that truly mattered. The diner TV flickered, a commercial for luxury cars. Beautiful people in beautiful clothes living beautiful lives. All surface, no substance. Sarah turned away. For the first time she didn't feel envy, just exhaustion. Maybe someday she'd find someone who saw her worth. Maybe she'd build a simple, honest life. Maybe she'd learn to measure success in moments of connection rather than bank balances. But Michael was gone. That chance was lost. And all she had now was the expensive lesson that some mistakes can't be undone. Some bridges once burned stay broken. And some people once lost are gone forever. The price of greed wasn't poverty. It was the haunting knowledge of what you threw away. And that price, Sarah was learning, was something you paid every single day for the rest of your life. Michael and Julia, present day. They sat on their back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. A modest house in a nice neighborhood. Nothing ostentatious, just a home full of love and laughter. Julia rested her head on Michael's shoulder, her hand on her swollen belly. Their first child, due in 3 months. "Do you ever think about her?" Julia asked quietly. "About Sarah?" "Sometimes," Michael admitted. "Not with anger anymore. More like sadness for what she lost. Not me specifically, but the ability to see value in things that don't shine. I saw her last month, at the store where she works." "I know, I was there." "Think she learned anything?" Michael was quiet. "I think she learned that money can't buy happiness. But I don't think she's learned that happiness was never about money to begin with. That real wealth is this, sitting on a porch with someone you love, watching the sunset, feeling completely content." Julia turned to look at him. "You're wiser than you look, mechanic. I had good teachers." He kissed her forehead. "My mom, my uncle in his way, and you. You taught me that real love doesn't wait for perfect circumstances. It shows up in the mess and stays. Like finding out your boyfriend is secretly a millionaire. Like forgiving him for being an idiot about it." They laughed together, the sound carrying across their simple yard. Inside, Helen was making dinner. Joe and Tommy were coming over later. Ordinary moments, everyday joys. The kind of wealth that couldn't be deposited or spent. "I hope she finds happiness," Julia said finally. "Real happiness, the kind that exists without price tags." "Me too," Michael agreed. "But that's her journey now. Ours is here. And I wouldn't trade this, any of this, for anything in the world." Julia smiled, settling back against him. "Not even $45 million? Not even 46 million, he corrected, grinning. "Investments did well." She swatted his arm playfully, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon. Rich in the ways that mattered, poor in nothing that counted. And somewhere across town, Sarah closed up the boutique, rode the bus home alone, and learned to live with the ghost of what could have been. Some lessons cost everything to learn. And the most expensive ones are the ones we teach ourselves through our own choices. Sarah had chosen greed over love, appearance over character, money over heart, and she would spend the rest of her life paying the price.